My name's Monk Rowe, and I'm happy to have Steve Davis with me today for the Fillius Jazz Archive. And I was going to introduce you as, what you do, but I thought I'd let you do that because as a musician, you probably wear many hats,
including this one.
Including that one.
Yeah, $12 on Canal Street in New York. Well, I play the trombone. I'm a musician who happens to play the trombone. I love jazz music. I have since I was a teenager. I compose music as well. I'm an educator. Very interested in many things in life, not just music, but that's been kind of my main area, certainly, of employment, and my life's work is involved in playing music and writing music and teaching music.
Is there one of those things that is the most important to you?
Well, I would have to say probably just the playing has always come first, at least up to this point in my life. I'm 50 now. Just trying to be a good musician and a good player. And once again, I wound up kind of settling on the trombone at around 14, 15 years old. But I love the bass. I almost was a bass player for a little while there, and end of high school and college, and even some kind of on the down low, doing some gigs around after college over the years. And I'm a fan of the rhythm section. I love the bass. I love the piano, and I've never had a piano lesson in my life, but I've had many lessons in terms of being around great pianists and just great musicians who, that's one thing about jazz players in general. Certainly many of the best horn players that I've ever met and been around, we all can kind of sit down and play some changes on the piano, and that translates to your horn. And when I teach my trombone students over the years, or if I go do a clinic or workshop or whatever, and there's a room full of hungry young trombone players that they're all sitting in desks, there's 20 of them, 24 of them, whatever, and you walk into a room and they're all hungry and they look like there he is at 9 in the morning and they want to take a bite out of your leg or something, And I say that in jest, of course. And, I always kind of immediately go to, guys, if you want to be an improviser and a real jazz player / jazz trombonist, you got to play the piano on the trombone. And a lot of them go, huh? What do you mean? And I always try to look at the music that way, that you're a human being first and foremost, hopefully every day of your life. Secondly, you're a musician 24/7 without the horn in your hands or without sitting at the drums or whatever you play. Thirdly, you hope to be a very good or great trombonist in my case, in our case. So I try to establish that right off the bat, that there's kind of an order of things.
I totally agree. I can't imagine teaching. I teach saxophone here, and I couldn't begin to teach improvisers if I didn't have some piano skills.
Right.
And then I try to pass that on to them if I can.
Yeah. And when I was 18 and I came from Binghamton, New York to the University of Hartford, to the Hart School, Hartt, and I met Jackie McLean, the great Jackie McLean, and I came to study at that program. I knew zero piano. Very little. And ironically, my grandmother, my Nana on my mother's side, was a wonderful stride pianist. She could really play, and I've got a few cassettes. I wish we had more. But I grew up hearing her play and playing with her a little bit for a few precious years. She died when I was 19 in 1986, but she didn't read a note. She played everything in C or F, And then when I started to play a little, you know, I would call a tune, There'll Never Be Another You, or some little tune that I was learning, and she'd say, oh, okay, what key? I'd say E flat, because that was in the real book, which was brand new then in those days. In E flat, and she'd say, Jesus Christ, you know, she'd bitch, and, you know, my God, oh God, and say, okay, and then just play great, you know, just kill it in E flat. But, you know, it's funny that, it's ironic that I grew up with her in my life, and as is often the case, you just take people and things for granted, and I kind of thought, well, yeah, that's Nana, you know, everybody's grandmother can sit down and play Undecided and Honeysuckle Rose and, you know, Embraceable You on the piano, and I realized almost nobody's grandmother or Nana could do that, and so I kind of learned totally, I came in totally raw. I was an ear player, totally, all through my adolescence. And then I started to learn 2-5-1, little voicings, and yeah.
But if you think about it, isn't that a pretty good way to develop your ears first and then learn some theory?
I feel that way. I wouldn't change a thing. And we were talking about Al Ham, who's now retired from Binghamton University, or SUNY Binghamton when I was growing up. And, you know, and you took a workshop there. I did too. And this would be, oh my gosh, 1982. I had just started playing trombone for maybe a year. I played baritone horn before that, euphonium, which was a result of playing trumpet at first, getting braces, almost quitting, wanting to quit, having to go talk to my dad. My mom said, you need to ask your father if you're going to quit. And he told me that my grandsir used to say, well, the king is the man who can, and Davises aren't quitters. What are your options? And I said, well, Mr. Ross said I could switch to a bigger mouthpiece, baritone, same fingerings. Well, give that a shot. I'm so glad I did. And anyway, so I wound up on the trombone, played the tuba a little bit too, and getting back to our point, the theory, and I think this happened to you too. You were saying where I'm there the first day, and Al Ham, God bless him, he pulls out giant steps, and I'd heard it, you know, but it was just kind of a cool record to listen to, and then it just hit me between the eyes. But he said something that stuck with me to this day. He said 1, 2, 3, 5. Just try to spell the changes: B major 7, D 7, G major 7, B flat 7, E flat major 7, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 2, 3, 5. Then you have to elongate when you land on E flat major. Boo boo doo boo bee hop is what Train would play. One of the many things he played. And that really helped me, you know, a great deal. Just that simple principle, I thought, I'd never even thought about this, putting the intervallic numbers to the chord sequences. And, I was kind of off and running after that.
Wow.
And I didn't play the piano still for a number of years, but my mind was starting to correlate, what I was hearing to intervals and kind of putting numbers to them. And then when I got to Hart, we had a theory piano teacher. He's still there, one of my colleagues, Peter Woodard, who I believe studied with John Mahegan, who also taught people like Larry Willis. So Peter Woodard showed us some, 7/3 and, ninths and just, the kind of fundamentals of the piano, and you're trying to get your fingers to work. I was 18 years old. I felt like a, kind of spastic. I just couldn't do it. And then one day you make a mistake and you go, hey, what's that? Yeah. It's A major over C, whoa, second inversion, A major triad over C. Hey, I've heard this before. And you start finding things. And then you pick up your horn and put it on your horn. And to me, that's, we're not dealing with the rhythm of the music, which is really the main thing, and just having a sound. Mm-hmm. And, just a good sound, a pleasant sound, But
do you require your students to be able to play all the major scales without, like hesitation?
Yeah, I'm not particularly heavy-handed with those kind of tasks, but I do check their temperature. I've got 4 really good young trombone students, jazz trombone majors, right now at the Jackie McLean Institute of Jazz at Hart, University of Hartford. And, just like I did, they all want to run, go, 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 and they don't really have control of their instrument. And if you don't know your major scales, or I'll even go a little further and say chord qualities, like the basic chord qualities, major 7s, dominant 7s, minor 7s. Of course, dominants are where you can really get into altering, and I say that's where all the action is, And up to the 9, 11, 13, Dorian minor, all that stuff that now I can address and teach and be a little bit systematic with it. But I don't dwell on it, though. I also try to get them playing whatever they're interested in playing, too, right off the bat. Like, bring in a tune you like. Or are you writing anything? So I'll work with them in numerous areas to kind of keep them engaged and feeling personally connected to what they're doing. I'm there to help them find their voices. I'm not there to crank out a bunch of cookie cutter, kind of clones or something. I mean, that's no way. No one did that to me. Mm-hmm. Jackie McLean didn't do that to me. I didn't have a jazz trombone teacher at Hart.
Interesting.
There wasn't one. But Professor McLean asked me at my audition, who are you listening to? I said, J.J. Johnson, Curtis Fuller, Slide Hampton. He said, you like Curtis Fuller? I said, oh, yeah. I have Blue Train, which I bought in Ithaca, New York with my dad. Mm-hmm. I forget that there was a great record store there. This was in the early, mid-'80s, and I bought a copy of Blue Train in Ithaca. I'll never forget that. And he said, oh, yeah, you like Curtis Fuller? Would you like to take some lessons with him? And this was in 1985, and my jaw just hit the floor. Just the thought of that was just so impossible to me. But that was one of his contemporaries, and this was 30 some years ago. And true to his word, my freshman year, he brought Curtis Fuller to Hart one day. And that was enough for me for 4 years, just to be around Curtis Fuller for a day. But, and then he came back another time. He also brought Gratian Moncourt. He brought Steve Turre several times, who was playing with Woody Shaw at the time, and that was very exciting. So, I did have a few lessons, but not really. I just sort of got to meet some of my heroes quickly, and then when I went to New York, they'd remember. And my buddy John Hasselback from Buffalo, he's a great trombone player. He was at Hart at the time, too. We were roommates, so we'd make our sojourns from Hartford down to New York City, go to see JJ in '87 when he had his comeback, go to see Curtis play with Benny Golson and Art Farmer, with the Jazz Tet when they had their resurgence in the '80s, or Timeless All-Stars, Harold Land, Bobby Hutcherson, Cedar, Buster, Billy Higgins. So, they'd remember. Oh, those are Jackie's little guys. Curtis would remember us.
Jackie's little guys. I like that. Were those things you saw mostly in the jazz clubs?
Yeah.
So what did you
Sweet
learn?
Basil.
Yeah. What did you learn by listening and observing?
Oh, wow! It's hard to put it into words. It was just magnificent those days. Obviously, just the music was incredible. The aura. It just felt so hip to be in the room with Cedar Walton's trio, and whether it was David Williams, Buster Williams, or Ron Carter, I saw all 3 of those versions of Cedar's trio. Usually it was David Williams, but I remember hearing Ron Carter, Sir Ron, who subsequently, years later, I got to play with Cedar and record with him. I got to I'm still playing in Ron Carter's big band every year. What an honor, to wind up playing with your heroes. But in 1987, I was 19, 20, and I used to love to go hear the trio gigs, especially Cedar or Hank Jones or Tommy Flanagan. And it was just, but also, or to go over to Bradley's later, just to be able to be accepted by these great musicians. It was a cultural thing, It was, I always made a joke that, because it probably happened once when I was young and I was in there, and it was John Hicks, the late great John Hicks, the pianist. It was at Bradley's, and he kind of looked over at me like, oh man, this guy, who is this guy? He was trying to get a drink, and I was probably trying to bashfully get a drink, and I'm just standing there, probably just corny, a young kid. Yeah. And he's like, oh man, this guy. But then later, I think he heard me with Jackie McLean, and the next time I went in, he kind of recognized me, and oh yeah, trombone, Jackie Mack, yeah. And that to me that was everything. I don't know how much of that happens still in the same way today. I think it's a little different now.
A recent person I was talking to was commenting on a lot of the young musicians become leaders too soon before they even know how to be side men and observe
side
good
women.
leaders.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And it's not their fault in a lot of ways, because there aren't as many gigs to be had where bands can work 6 nights a week, weeks on end. That's very rare these days. I mean, it still exists, but not that often. So a lot of young players have to, like we were talking about earlier, have to make their own opportunities to play. And I don't think anyone from our generation or older than the 20, 30-year-olds now begrudges them that at all. But there also, though, there's an attitude about it that I think a lot of the young players want to be accepted or mentored. They're just a little awkward about how to go about it. I think because of technology, which is a double-edged sword. There's so much great about YouTube and Facebook and instant this, and that everything's just at your fingertips. And there's so much great about that, and then there's so much not good about it. And it's kind of created a sort of everything is anything whenever you want it attitude, and that even permeates into the jazz world, where generally young up-and-coming players are quite reverent and respectful of the masters or their elders, whether it's on a local scene or if you are lucky enough to have the opportunity to be around somebody who's a name, established master of jazz. Generally, and I think it still exists, that the younger players generally do have a sort of awe and appreciation of being there. But I don't know. Like I was kind of hinting at before, I think a lot of that has been a little bit just kind of washed away by social media and just how easy it is to have access to everything that they,
It's hard to differentiate from what really is important when everything is there at your fingertips.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to start out with a really hard question, but I saved it until now. Let's suppose I cornered you when I said I have 2 talented grandkids, and they really want to be jazz musicians, and they're 16 and 17.
Yeah.
What would you say about that?
Wow. Yeah, I understand why you framed it as a hard question, if they have the burning desire to play and they love it, they got to do it. They got to be jazz musicians. They've got to do it. But I would also say there is absolutely no shame in diversifying your possibilities to make yourself as employable as possible. My old man always, reminds me that it's commerce. Yeah, it's art, but you better figure out how to make it commerce too, because you got to make a living. So I would, and this is what I encourage students who are jazz majors at the university level, that I've been around quite a bit and over 26 years now. It's a way of life. It's not going to be easy financially. And, excuse me, be open. I mean, it's 2017. Be open-minded to all kinds of music. Sure, what we know as jazz is home. Certainly it is for me still and always will be. But I love all kinds of music. And, I've played in this situation, that situation. I've done some gigs I never dreamed that I would be involved with. And not just for money, but it just, because of just life experiences. You meet some people and, you give it a whirl. Hey, it's kind of cool, So I think that, or other areas of interest. My wife, Abena Kumsen Davis, she teaches ethics and social justice at the Fieldston School in Riverdale, in the Bronx, New York. Went to Sarah Lawrence, went to Columbia for a master's. She's a scholar. She also is an incredibly talented, great singer, and was in the cast of Fela, the Broadway Fela, about Fela Kuti. She played Fela's mother for 3 years. And she sings in really hip wedding bands that do mostly R&B and soul. And she sings in a rock band that's also super hip called Van Davis. They took their name from Van Halen and Miles Davis. And it's a quartet. And they play at the 55 Bar in New York and all, in the Village and all kinds of gigs. And she's a great jazz singer. She's kind of an undiscovered gem. She just doesn't get to do it enough. So look out for that, because husband and wife are going to be doing something in the coming few years. And so she does it all. She makes a good living. She loves her teaching and her scholarship and social activism. And she also leads, she does lead it when she's there, but she's involved with the Women's Resistance Revival Choir, if people look that up on YouTube. And they've been doing a lot this past year, which is great and much needed. So she's doing all kinds of stuff. And it's not a fabrication, it's not an obligation. She loves all of it. Why not?
So you got to wear, like yourself, a lot of hats. The days of just playing your saxophone are pretty much gone.
You probably, where there's a will, there's a way. I would also remind grandkids or young players this. You'll always have that music in you. I mean, you're going to be a musician no matter what. McCoy Tyner drove a taxi cab after he made all the Impulse records with Coltrane, A Love Supreme, all that. Now, he did it for about 8 months, I heard. Then he played with Art Blakey and the Messengers. This was in the mid-late 60s after he left Coltrane. And then, things worked out pretty well for Mr. Tyner, I would say. And he's an icon and just one of the greatest ever. So if McCoy could drive a cab for a while, I think any of us can do something to get by, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
All right.
So
I hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Right.
The trombone. Is there something about the trombone that requires more skill at some particular thing than some of the other instruments?
I don't think more. I think they're all hard. I mean, every instrument is beautiful. Every instrument has its own idiosyncrasies. I think it's, when I say hard, I think it's difficult and requires a lot of dedication and just experience and living with your instrument to really develop a true personal sound and fluency technically. And when I say technically, not just for the sake of technique, but to have the technique that you need to express yourself appropriately in any given moment in the music. So I don't regard the trombone any differently, really. But with that said, yeah, the instrument has its idiosyncrasies, and I've always tried to be as clear a player as possible, be as articulate as I can be.
I'm glad you said that, because I was listening to some of your recordings, and then I was listening to Bill Watrous, and to me, you articulate considerably more than some other trombone players I've heard. Like, I relate it to sort of using consonants when we speak.
Yeah.
And some guys hardly tongue at all when they
Right.
start a note, and I noticed that about you, and I liked it.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it. Back to the trombone. Its natural characteristics or idiosyncrasies, and yeah, there are ways to sort of use the natural breaks in the horn, and use the slide, and you can. Pardon me. You can. Get certain passages to come out easily without tonguing each and every note. What I've tried to do is, I'm having a little coffee stuff here. What I've tried to do is, utilize those things about the horn, but still articulate lightly, like a soft do tongue, so that the notes have enough punctuation that the rhythm is strong.
Mm-hmm.
So that the rhythm section, the drummers, the bass players, the pianists, guitar, whatever, they can feel you.
Yeah.
They can feel your time, your beat. And when I first started playing the horn, my dad had the Sidewinder. There's no trombone on that. I listened to Kind of Blue. There's no trombone on that. I listened to a lot of Blue Note records, Lee Morgan and Hank Mobley and Horace Silver, Junior Cook and Blue Mitchell. No trombone on that. I just loved the feeling of the music. Clifford Brown, Max Roach, it's either Harold Land or Sonny Rollins on those records. I wasn't even really thinking about the trombone so much, just the language.
Uh-huh.
Then, of course, I did hear Cape Verdean Blues, Horace Silver, where J.J. plays on 3 tracks, along with, at the time, a young Woody Shaw and Joe Henderson. And J.J. Nutville is on that record, and a slow C minor piece called Bonita, which was the one I could actually play along with at first. And I heard J.J.'s sound on that in my bedroom in Binghamton on Crary Avenue in the early 80s, and was just galvanized. I just thought, that's the trombone. I hadn't really heard much other trombone before that. A little bit of Trummy Young with Louis Armstrong on a Smithsonian collection, and I liked that too. Then I got JJ in my ear, and it was just, I got spoiled rotten. I heard JJ Johnson. Then I heard Curtis on the Messengers records. Mm-hmm. Absolutely fell in love with him. To this day, he's one of the absolute, I think, greatest trombonists ever. Most important improvisers, prolific. Then I got to Slide Hampton. But see, along the way, I heard Carl Fontana on one of those Dick Gibson, Colorado jazz parties next to Kai Winding, Trummy Young, and Irby Green playing Undecided, which was a tune my Nana used to play on the piano. So I thought, oh, yeah, I know this song. And I loved them all, but then Carl comes in and he's so smooth, and I was like, ooh, I like that. And, so, and then Rosalino, of course, Al Gray. Oh man, Al Gray. I could go on and on. Julian Priester. So many records. I love them all now. I just appreciate. Steve Turre was a big influence on me. So I certainly appreciate all the players, but there's something about JJ and Curtis and Slide, and particularly JJ, because he really changed the game when he came along. He was our Charlie Parker on the trombone.
Well, do you recall the downbeat blindfold tests? Downbeat used to.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So, you ready?
Oh geez. All right. Wish me luck. I'm afraid it might be me.
You don't have to be afraid.
Oh my God. Is that all the things you are?
It's from the Rochester Jazz Festival.
Oh yeah. That's Joe Farnsworth playing drums. Yeah, right. Man, I was like, the drummer's killing. That's That's Joe. Yeah.
Well, it's not that great a recording because it was live. Quality-wise, but I wanted to play it for you because the older gentlemen that I've interviewed, the fellows that were playing back in the 30s and 40s, they always insisted that you have to find your own sound.
Yeah.
They'd say, Sweet Edison, one note, it's it's important. So what makes Steve Davis's trombone
identifiable?
Identifiable. What do you hope is identifiable?
Yeah, that's a great question. I've always tried to sing through my horn. I love melodies, and no matter how much stuff you want to play and try to get into the intricacies of harmony and rhythm, and play different things that are kind of on the edge a little, or in the cracks, or a little inside, outside, all that hip stuff. I love that too. I love it. But now, when the chips are down, I like to pat my foot and play a pretty song for people. I feel that musicians, no matter what type of musician you are, I'm a jazz musician. I have been my whole life, since I was a kid. And our job is to play songs for people. That's our number one job. You better be able to play some Happy Birthday in whatever key people start singing it in, and hear it, pick it up, and play it. And it's December. No matter what your faith is, it's that time of year where there are a lot of holiday chestnuts, pardon the pun, and so you got to know these tunes. If someone says, "Oh, can you play Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas?" I hope so, because you're going to embarrass yourself. Or on New Year's Eve, you're doing a little New Year's gig, and you better know Auld Lang Syne, just be able to just play it. Because if you're trying to play and work on, Wayne Shorter's Witch Hunt and Speak No Evil and all these great modern classics, or write your own super hip stuff with time signature changes and all this, and you can't play Auld Lang Syne on New Year's Eve, or Happy Birthday for your grandmother, or what's going on there? That's not going to work. So, I hope that when people hear my sound, they just say, "Oh yeah, there's Davis, man. he's a pretty player. You know, he plays sweet, man, sweet player, and that's good enough for me. And then, hey, ooh, listen to that. You know, once in a while, zap. You know, oh, ooh, man, that was hip. You know, but I'm not trying to, you know, redefine the course of music every time I take a solo. That's for darn sure. I just want to take a good solo, start to finish, that's swinging and feels good for my fellow musicians and for the listener, most importantly, people who don't play.
That's a terrific answer. Thank you.
Yeah.
We were talking about how everything is available in technology, and there's been a lot of transcribed solos that are now viewable and listenable on the internet. In fact, I've seen a couple of yours that someone transcribed.
Yeah, it's kind of random. I see them and I go, that one? Like, wow, okay. You know.
If a student came to you with one of those and said, well, Mr. Davis, the chord symbol says F minor 7, and you played a F sharp.
Yeah.
Can you tell me why you did that?
Yeah. Yeah, I probably could if I heard it back, because it was leading to something else. You were on your way somewhere. I mean, there are classic jazz compositions, tunes, that have notes in them that are technically incorrect with what the chord might be, but they're the rightest note in the world. You know, that's part of the music. So, Eddie Henderson, the great trumpeter, he said to me once, along these lines, just at a gig or wherever we were, he leaned over to me and said, you know, Herbie Hancock could make C sharp sound like the rightest note of ever over C major 7. Now, see, if Herbie Hancock played it, it'd be the rightest note you could play, you know, because he'd get to it somehow or pass through it. And, you know, I knew exactly what he meant. And you know, it's yeah, sometimes the theoretical answer is not the answer.
But at the same time, I would think there'd be a time, a circumstance where you might point out to a student who's improvising and something they played, you might want to make them think about that or ask. In other words, are there wrong notes?
Well, sure. I mean, I know the politically correct cliche answer is there are no wrong notes, man, and you know, you can play anything you want. I mean, that's true if you know what you're doing. You know, I mean, if you can resolve to something, or if you have some sort of awareness or plan about what you're playing, but otherwise, I think that answer can be misconstrued or reappropriated in a not such a good way. You know, you can play anything. Well, okay, I don't know if it's going to sound good, but yeah, sure you can. You know, getting back to having a sound too. There's one thing I have to. When you played that for me, when I wasn't expecting to hear me, and so when I first heard it, I have to confess, I had a first. Is that Slide? Wait, is it JJ? No, it's me. Because I wasn't thinking of me, or Curtis too, and so you know I've been compared certainly to JJ a lot and Curtis, and I just want to say on the record about that, if anybody says, "Oh, Davis, yeah, man, I hear a lot of JJ and you're playing," I say, "Thank you." That's nothing but a compliment. That's like telling, you know, a guard or you know a ball player that, man, I see some Michael Jordan in your game. I mean, you know, man, you kind of remind me of Kobe Bryant a little bit. I mean, you know, what are you going to say? Thank you. That's an ultimate compliment. Mm-hmm. With that said, I certainly hope, you know, that my sound is identifiable, because I'll never be J.J. Johnson, that's for darn sure, or Curtis Fuller. I'm stuck with this guy. So I may as well enjoy them. And I had to come to terms with that, Monk. At some point. But I think as an educator, I think it's totally fine to emulate your heroes for a while. Go ahead. Jackie McLean was still listening to Bird when he was in his 60s. He loved him. But he sounded like J. Mac. It is important, though, to trust yourself after a while. Just play you.
Are you thinking, normally are you thinking about the chord changes when you're improvising?
Wow. Yeah, I mean, not always, no. It's a hard thing to put into words, isn't it? It's tonal centers sometimes. Let's say rhythm changes, good old B-flat rhythm changes, right? If you get too bogged down thinking, two chords per measure, and you're just literally trying to spell that. I mean, man, that's hard for anybody to do. But if you get to know, as J. Mac used to call the language, he would kind of say, learn your turnarounds, play your B-flat stuff through these measures, so you're thinking a little bigger. And you're not thinking so specifically, but there are phrases that if you analyze them, they're the flat 9 of G7, they're the major third of this, they're, so it is technically embodying or delineating all these changes. So yes, I do think about it, but there are times where you've been doing it long enough that it becomes second nature, and you let go of that and try to go into another plane of consciousness, really, where you're trying to play things to engage the rhythm section. For years, I've had the privilege to play with the great Larry Willis, the great pianist, and he's a dear friend of mine, and he's in his 70s, and we really hit it off about almost 20 years ago now, and at least 15 years we've been playing a lot, whether it's his band or my band or whatever collaborations, or just on gigs together. And that guy, Larry is such an incredible accompanist. He's a great soloist, great composer, but he's a really masterful accompanist. If you try to fill up all the space, you're a moron. Why would you do that? The music will suffer. If you've got someone that brilliant and sensitive, play something, see what you get back, and then he's going to play something to push you somewhere. But it's all supportive. I played with Chick Corea quite a bit. The same thing. I mean, leave some space because you'll be glad you did.
That should be in caps, all caps.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I'm still trying to get there, because we all have that tendency. You want to play all your stuff, and you just think, wait, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You're squandering an opportunity to converse with incredible, great musicians.
It sort of leads me to a question I was contemplating about. Are there any things on the bandstand that can annoy you?
Yeah, to be honest, yeah. I mean, usually not. I always look at the bandstand or the stage, when you look at a piano, or even if there's no piano, but particularly when there's a piano and a drum set and maybe an amp for the bass, and whatever it may be, whatever the setup, some microphones, and there's or even just an empty stage or an empty bandstand, and it's just there. And I get the same feeling when I go to Cooperstown, ironically, not too far from here. I've taken my kids there several times over the years because I'm a big baseball fan. I just love it. and I look at Doubleday Field just empty. I sit there in the bleachers, and I've also been when there's exhibition games, but when it's just empty. And I look at a Little League field. I've been on many Little League fields in West Hartford and throughout Connecticut because I have two boys who've played, and I coached a little bit and grew up playing in Binghamton, you know. And I always looked at a empty basketball court and especially an empty ball field, as this possibility. It's just, there it is. It's just beckoning us, you know, what's possible. And hasn't changed a bit. An empty bandstand, you just think, at the Vanguard, I mean, it hasn't changed. I mean, I got to play there quite a bit with Jackie McLean in the 90s, and Slide Hampton's like a small world of trombones, Roy Hargrove's big band, recently Christian McBride's big band. Never led my own band there. I'm dying to do that. I hope so one of these days. And because I love that room. I love the sound. But still, when you go and you just see that stage,
It's like a shrine.
it's a shrine, and you think of all the incredible music that's happened there, and then you look at a ball field and think the same thing. You know, it might be Fenway Park or same kind of thing, or Doubleday Field. You know, I look at it and just think, wow, how many players have done it on that diamond, and some kids could go out and do something great today. I love it. It's open possibility. So I didn't really answer your question about, the only thing that would annoy me is when you sense anyone in the band is just playing for themselves. And this is a Larry Willis quote. This is great. One time we were talking, there was a gig, and I don't even remember who it was, but we said something like, yeah, it wasn't working out so well, or yeah, it was no one in particular, I don't even remember. And Larry said, well, Stevie, he said, that's because so-and-so hasn't figured out yet that this music is not about him, it's not about her, it's not about you, and it's not about me, it's about it. And he points up, and I thought, oh yeah. So as long as everyone involved, their intention, Chick Corea uses that word a lot, what's your intention? And I like to say, are you available musically? Are you available? You might have your eyes closed. I might be standing in front of the rhythm section with my eyes closed, but my radar is on, man. I'm open. I'm listening. I hopefully, usually, and trying to be available.
You're attending to what's going on.
Oh yeah.
And how you're fitting into the whole thing.
That's so important to me, and I think to any great jazz music, that the records we love to listen to, the recordings, the performances we enjoy so much seeing. It's when, and it doesn't have to be overt or anything over the top. It's a fine line, but you can tell when it's just on, man. It's happening, and everyone's in there together, you know. It's the best. It's just an incredible feeling. No. Either to listen to or to be a part of. It's just amazing.
You have some good answers. Do you know that? Okay,
yeah.
You're a composer too.
Yeah.
And I'm going to make an attempt here. See if you can name this tune. Starts on beat 4. Oh, by the way, this sound.
Yeah.
That's one of our trombone players here. I've lined up a lesson.
You don't say. That's great.
Okay, so here we go. Starts on beat 4. Ba 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 da ba ba. It's one of your songs.
Is that the melody?
I believe so. Ba ba. I'm not sure I have the pitches right. I wrote the rhythm down.
Wow.
Someone's gaze.
Oh, Abana's gaze.
Abana's
gaze. Where did it go?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah,
Ominous Gaze.
I like that. It's nice. It's hooky. And where did it come from?
Man, her spirit. You know, I was tinkering with this idea actually, but then when we got together and I kind of finished the tune and knew it was just the perfect title for it.
Okay.
And it all just kind of coalesced. Excuse me. Yeah, Abana's incredible. Yeah, thank you for bringing that one up. I'm very proud of that tune. I try to write compositions that are memorable, that are catchy. Horace Silver did that. I mean, to me, all the your namesake, Thelonious Monk. I mean, you remember his songs. I mean, my God. I mean, they're there for you to remember. It's not like you're baffled by them, even though you can be by Monk's music, I suppose. But it's not nebulous or where you. A lot of times I go hear a group playing, in recent years, and it sounds really good, and they're doing interesting things, and there's a lot going on, and interesting, unexpected twists and turns in the harmonic structure and the rhythmic structure. Sometimes the melodies aren't the strongest, but you hear stuff and say, "Wow, that was interesting," and the playing's great, and then you leave, and I can't remember one shred of a song. I don't remember it. It was interesting. It was good. I could imagine picking up my horn and improvising in there and having a great time, but I don't remember the music other than this kind of overall feel. Yeah. And I think a lot of jazz players, for whatever reason, have felt the need to try to outdo everything and even outdo themselves, and everybody's become rather self-indulgent. And yeah, I can be too. I love to explore. I love to play. I do it because I love it. I'm not denying that. But I also have an awareness about playing for people. Mm-hmm. Like I said before, playing songs for people. And most people who pay their money to come and listen, they want to feel good about it. They don't want to sit there going, what the heck are they doing? I remember J-Mac said to me once, we were playing somewhere, and Jackie was a pioneer. He was an explorer. He was very uncompromising about his music, Even him, even with that spirit. And we were playing one of his new pieces, Rhythm of the Earth, or one of his new songs. And it was getting out there a little bit. And he leaned over to me and he said, son, man, the audience, they look like they got a bunch of question marks and a cartoon bubble over their head. It's not good. He said, let's play the Bible song next. Bible song is Around Midnight. Oh. So give them something that they know. Oh. I mean, Thelonious Monk, Around Midnight, and he called it the Bible song.
I did not know that.
That's what J-Mac called it. And,
okay.
And what a lesson right there. I mean, it's December, so we used to play. This is 25 years ago, 1992. My first December week with J-Mac, officially in the band. I was 24 years old still. We're playing the Vanguard. We're playing all that hard new music. Great, exciting. Everyone's there, and and I look back and I see the silhouettes by the globe back there. It hasn't changed, at all. And I see, man, is that Ronnie Matthews? Is that John Hicks? Is that Larry Willis? All these incredible pianists that, are on all the records. And Louis Hayes, the drummer, and maybe Harold Mayburn. I can't remember. It's just an incredible array of great musicians who were my heroes. And I'm just a young guy and trying to be there, And so we play the first few tunes, and then Jackie, it's December, he just went into a Christmas song, Chestnuts Roasting Out, Mel Torme,
Yeah.
And I was, I thought I knew it, but then I realized I hadn't really played it very often. And so he plays it in E flat. He turns to me to give me the bridge, and I kind of thought about it. He just took it back, and I literally just wanted to just dig a hole in the stage and disappear. And so I tell my students this one all the time because they're in the Jackie McLean Institute of Jazz. So I said, look, guys, just last week they had to play that song as part of their semester end final. And I told them the story. I said, look, this is the way I learned the song was the hard way. So you don't need to do that, And they love it,
He took it back. I
and they can connect with the history a little bit. And, I'm doing it in my own, believe me, extremely humble way. Jackie McLean made us feel like we were there with Bud Powell when he was learning to play with him. We were there with Miles, when these great musical moments were happening, and Mingus and Art Blakey, and he played with all of them in the 50s. And Bird, he learned to play from Bird and Bud Powell. Sonny Rollins was his high school classmate. If that ain't the real deal, I don't know what is. So, the least we can do, my dear friend and colleague Nat Reeves, the great bassist, I'm going to play with him at the university tomorrow. And, he was one of my teachers as well. He was there with Jackie at least 5 years before I even got there as a student, and then became a young teacher, adjunct at first for years. And I've been involved with that program my whole adult life. And but Nat Reeves and I have been there a long time, and Renee McLean is there now. Javon Jackson became our chairperson 5 years ago now, I guess, 4 or 5 years ago. So he joined the program, and so many great people over the years. And we have a lot of great alumni, people like Desron Douglas, the bassist who's playing with everybody, Jimmy Green, the great tenor saxophonist, a young trumpeter, Josh Bruno, who's in New York, Jonathan Barber, great young drummer. I have a trombone student, James Burton, who's on all the big band gigs I'm doing in New York with Christian McBride and Jimmy Heath, and So I could just go on and on. We have just a legion of great players who come through the program since Jackie McLean died in 2006, and he stopped teaching in 2003. It's just amazing to be a part of that.
Well, I'll have to remember that for these students that occasionally are looking for schools, to check that out.
Yeah, we've just started we will be starting our master's program next year, I believe. So we haven't had one all these years, but Javon Jackson's really helped fight for that. So we've got a new graduate program just ready to take off finally, which is really great. And wow. But I can't. Whenever I do an interview, Jackie McLean's name is going to come up a lot. He was just like a second musical father to me. My dad is my musical father, though. He knows a lot of music, man, and he really hit me to a lot of music. So, yeah.
Well, you were in luck when you were a kid. You had your dad, and you had your boogie woogie playing
Nana. That is, and my grandsir, my dad's father. Played some trumpet as a hobby. He was a newspaper man, journalist, but he loved Duke Ellington and Glenn Gray and the Casaloma Orchestra. That was his favorite band, and the Duke, and gave me an autograph program. Man, you would love this. I wish I could show it to you, but maybe I'll send you a photo of it.
Okay.
I have a signed. Oh, God, I get chills just thinking about this. I have a signed program from 1932 of Duke's band. Johnny Hodges, Ray Nance, Harry Carney, Juan Teasall, Tricky Sam Nat, they're Barney Brigard, they're all in there. It's and Duke Ellington's autograph.
Oh,
Fr-
that's
and
just
from in Boston. He was in high school, and then he went to Amherst College and was on the student dance committee or something his junior year, and brought Duke Ellington. He got Duke Ellington a gig at Amherst College.
that's great.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. So it's kind of, and then Glenn Gray the next year. Yeah, so it's in both sides of my family, the love of jazz and blues. Yeah.
Well, you speak well of the music, and I like the idea of your students having a teacher who has the bandstand experience as well as the academic background. So
Yeah.
I'm going to wish you well on your gig tonight. It's a semi-pickup situation.
Yeah. Yeah.
I hope they leave some space for you.
Oh, yeah. I'm sure they will. Mike Dubinowitz is a really cool cat. He played with Maynard and played with my good buddy Chris Jensen, who's I grew up with in Binghamton, New York. A great tenor player. Not as well known as he should be in the jazz world, but anybody who knows him knows he can really play. So they played with Maynard together. I could go on and on. There's a lot of great musicians who don't, as you know, who really don't get their due or appreciated enough. But you can't do it for that. It's a way of life, and you certainly can't do it to get rich. But you do it because you love it, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. Being a jazz musician, wouldn't trade it for the world.
Right. That's a good note to end on.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much.
My
I
pleasure.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Okay.